We're so excited that you're here today. We are excited to meet you and get to know you a little bit better tonight. I am Lucia H. Garcia. I'm the Assistant Dean of Student Affairs for the Parkinson School of Health Sciences and Public Health, and I am one of the co-chairs for the Loyola Stands Against Gun Violence Committee. It is an honor to welcome you here to the 6th Annual Community Advocacy and Violence Prevention Summit. This year's theme is The Turning Point, Uniting Against Gun Violence. Today's summit takes place during National Public Health Week. This year's theme Starts Here, underscores a critical truth that public health initiates, the critical truth that public health initiatives begin within our communities, driven by each individual and their commitment to change. In light of the pressing challenges facing our nation, including shifts in higher education, public health concerns, and policies that compromise the safety of our neighborhoods, our gathering today is not only timely, but it is essential. As educators and public health professionals, we have a moral obligation to actively engage in shaping policies that safeguard our communities and support our students. Our collective voice is vital in advocating for environments where education and public health can thrive. And today's summit, a signature event of the Parkinson School, marks the second convening at our Lakeshore campus and is a testament to our unwavering commitment to this cause. The Loyola Stands Against Gun Violence Committee, established almost a decade ago, embodies a spirit of interprofessional collaboration and passionate advocacy. And to the dedicated members of this committee, and to all present here, leaders, activists, families, students, staff, and allies, I extend my deepest gratitude. I'm continually grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with you in advocacy and activism, inspiring new groups of students and allies to drive change and uphold the fundamental human right to safety and security. Unfortunately, Senator Mike Simmons is unable to be here today. He was really excited about welcoming you here and our group that's joining us via Zoom, but he is working. He is currently in Springfield on the floor presenting a bill. So together, let's unite our voices during this critical time, strengthen our message, and remain steadfast in our commitment to fundamental human right of safety, security, and a future free from gun violence. So it is my pleasure to to introduce you to Dr. Cynthia Stewart, Director of Experiential Learning for the Parkinson School, for our blessing today.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just settle ourselves for a few moments. May we offer guidance, wisdom, grace, and respect to all who are present at this Loyola Stands gathering, whether those in person or virtually, and to all who will be affected by what you will hear tonight, or even the experiences that you bring into the room. May we brush off the chairs on which we sit to make clear a space for a meeting of the minds. May we brush off from our clothing any debris picked up on the way to clear our minds of extraneous matters. We wipe the blood from our hands to acknowledge and apologize for any hurt we have inflicted. We wipe the tears from our eyes to acknowledge and forgive any hurt we have received. We take the lump out of our throats to let go of any sadness or disappointment. We take the tightness out of our chest to let go of any fear or resentment. We acknowledge and pray for guidance, for the greater creator, spirit of all life. Now we ask that you speak through each of the speakers, and may it cause our hearts to take action against gun violence. Amen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stewart. And thank you to all of you for being here with us tonight in this room, and to the 100+ people on Zoom who are watching this via webinar. I am Michelle Cavusi. I am one of the co-chairs of Loyola Stands Against Gun Violence. I am also a professor of public health law and public health policy here at Loyola. We have a great lineup of speakers for you here tonight. Our keynote speaker, David Hogg, one of the most compelling voices of Gen Z, followed by gun violence interrupters, Chicago Cred and Firehouse Community Arts Center of Chicago, and then our own Loyola Stands Fellows. A detailed schedule along with speaker photos and bios are in your program. There will be a quick break at 6:15, restrooms out the door down the hall and to your left. And then the program will end at 7:30 p.m. when we'll have a light dinner for you and a resource fair in the lobby. I have another semi-logistical note for you, but it's an important one. Our speakers have the freedom to share their personal views. Their views may not align with other participants, and they may not align with those of Loyola University, but they are free to speak as they choose. They will share personal, sometimes traumatic experiences, and we are deeply grateful to them for being here tonight and for sharing those things with you. And we are grateful to them for their relentless work to reduce gun violence in this country. Our speakers will also give you takeaways, things that each of you can do to reduce gun violence. Some of these things take 2 minutes, and some of these things could involve a deeper commitment. You'll notice the QR codes on the walls. If you go to the QR code, you'll go to a link tree, and in the link tree, the link tree is organized by speaker. And after every speaker, you will see their 3 takeaways. And the takeaways may link you to something else, an organization to get involved with, an app to contact your elected officials. If you have any questions for the speakers, 3 of our presentations will involve a Q&A afterwards. One of them will be David Hogg's, and then the other 2 will be Chicago Creds and Firehouses. In your program, you were given note cards. Write your questions on the note cards, and then 2 of our fellows at the end of each of those presentations will gather your note cards at the end of the aisles. All right. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, David Hogg. On February 14th, 2018, David's life changed forever. As a senior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, he lost friends, classmates, and teachers in one of the biggest mass shootings, school shootings in American history. Passionate in his advocacy to end gun violence, David joined with friends from his high school to co-found March for Our Lives, which is now one of the world's largest youth-led movements. Just 5 weeks after they organized, March for Our Lives mobilized nearly 800,000 people in Washington, D.C., one of our nation's largest protests, and they continue to be a force to promote gun violence prevention. Since David founded March for Our Lives, he's become a New York Times best-selling author with his younger sister, Lauren, Never Again. He graduated from Harvard in 1993. He co-founded Leaders We Deserve, a grassroots political organization dedicated to electing young progressives to Congress and state legislatures across the country. And just weeks ago, he was elected as a vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. David Hogg is one of the most compelling voices of his generation, and we are honored to have him here tonight.
So I got to make one correction. Contrary to the conspiracy theories, I was not born in the 19th century, I guess that'd be the 20th century. I graduated in the year 2023. I know this job has aged me a lot, but just wanted to make sure you understood that. Anyways, now that we got that cleared up, I'm really happy to be here with you all because it's always so refreshing to know that that none of us are alone in this fight, and that there is that is not reliant on any single person. That was one of the hardest things that I had to learn in the aftermath of the shooting. My classmates and I were told all the time, the thing that we heard more than anything, other than the fact that it wouldn't be possible for us to change gun laws in Florida because it was such a red state, was that it was, from a lot of older people, we heard over and over again, my generation really messed things up, but thank God you kids are here to save us, right? And we took that, as much as I appreciate that sentiment, it's also really disrespectful to the generations and decades of work that have been done predominantly by black and brown women quietly, and have never gotten the attention or recognition or acknowledgement that they deserve behind the scenes to lay the groundwork for the gun safety movement to have as much success as it has had in the past, 5 or 10 years or so. But it's also wrong because it's to say that you're absolving yourself of any responsibility to be part of the solution here. We weren't old enough to vote when we went through the shooting. So what I would say back to them was, you're not dead yet, right? Still vote. You can still vote. You can still get out there and you can run for office. Don't just say like you can't engage in this fight. So thank you to all of you for being not one of those people that's like, what, the kids got it. Because it was really hard for us after the shooting to hear that and then see shooting after shooting after shooting happen and feel like we were responsible in many senses. It's kind of difficult for me to talk about this because I know that you all are such experts here on this, much more than the typical people that I talk to, obviously. But nonetheless, for those of you that don't know, I'll tell you a little bit about my background and story and how I got here and what I'm doing. On February 14th of 2018, it was a freezing day in Florida. It was about 70 degrees. So our door was open, which it rarely was, so we could hear everything going on outside of our classroom. And sometimes it's hard for people in areas like Chicago, probably I'd imagine, to understand the architectural layout of many of our schools in the South that are outdoor schools. So Parkland, our hallways are outside. All of our classroom doors open up, pretty much all of them open up into an open hallway that is just in the air. It's not, it's not like we're just one building and everybody is in that building. So as a result, we could hear everything going on outside of our classroom because the door was open. And we heard what sounded like a gunshot. And I turned to my classmate and he agreed. And we said to our teacher, like, hey, we think we heard something. And she went and closed the door. And right as she closed the door, the fire alarm went off. And as that happened, my classmates and I started evacuating from our classroom, going to our evacuation zone. And as we were doing that, a flood of students started running in the opposite direction of where we were going, saying, don't come this way, he's coming this way. And naturally, we started following those students. Unbeknownst to us at the time, we were running towards where the shooting was occurring, which was in the building right next to mine, the freshman building. And right before we got in front of the building, where the shooter was also attempting to shoot down from the third story of that building, he was attempting to shoot through the glass to kill students. Thankfully, right before we got out there, a janitor stopped us and said, don't come this way, he's coming this way. And right as he said that, the teacher in the classroom closest to us opened up her door and got about 60 students in her classroom in a matter of about 30 seconds. In a remarkable act of heroism by that teacher that undoubtedly, in my view, saved lives. When I got in that classroom, obviously there were a lot of students that were panicking, a lot of students that were throwing up, a lot of them that were just like hyperventilating and having panic attacks and didn't know how to handle it. Because how can you when you're a teenager or anybody of any age? And in that moment, because of my past 4 years of being in TV production and in speech and debate, I found myself in the unique position of having had to argue on both sides of topics like gun control for the past 4 years in speech and debate. And also being a broadcast student journalist, understanding how the news cycle worked, especially around these mass shootings that were becoming so common. And I knew one of the main tactics that the NRA used was to say, you can't talk about this because you're politicizing tragedy after these shootings happen, as if doing something about it is politicizing it. God forbid. And I, as a way of calming myself down and a way of also making sure that I was able to tell the story of my classmates, I interviewed them. And I asked them, what do you think about the NRA? What do you think about gun laws? What do you think about the fact that we're going through this as kids in the US? So that in the event that we did die in our classroom, hopefully our voices would carry on and create some kind of change, even if we were not able to make it out of that classroom. Because you don't know during these, it's easy for me to look back in hindsight and say, well, there was a mass shooter and he was in this part of the school that was right next to the building that I was in. But you don't know that at the time. You don't know if there are multiple shooters. You don't know if there are bombs on campus. You don't know what the hell is going on. And thankfully that day, I made it out of my classroom with my classmates in my immediate vicinity. But we'd come to find out 17 of my classmates and teachers would not. And of course, afterwards, we were furious and devastated, but we were also, I would say, just as devastated as we were furious because of the fact that we've seen this happen throughout our lives over and over and over again, where people of my age were born a year after Columbine happened. I remember seeing Sandy Hook in the news when I was in middle school and seeing our politicians send their thoughts and prayers over and over and over again, even as nothing really changed that much at a national level. And we were furious. So we decided to start organizing. And as we started organizing, a group of students and I came together and we said, what are we going to do? And we looked back to the civil rights movement for inspiration. And some of the things that we looked at were obviously showing up, at our state legislature to be able to create change. And as we said we were going to do that, as we said we were going to fight to raise the age to buy a gun in Florida to 21, because we'd come to find out that the shooter at my high school, although he was a criminal, he was not a mastermind with deep connections to the cartel or the black market or something like that. He was a 19-year-old anti-Semite and racist who was able to legally purchase an AR-15, even though he could not legally purchase a handgun from a federally licensed dealer at the time because he was under the age of 21. But he could legally purchase an AR-15 because he was over 18 years old, because that is the logic of the NRA. So we talked about raising the age to buy a gun. We also talked about passing red flag law, because we found out that the shooter at my high school had repeatedly threatened to shoot at my high school multiple times before the shooting. He had the FBI had been informed about him, local law enforcement had been informed about him, and the local police had showed up at his house over a dozen times prior to the shooting. Despite all of that, there was not a law in place in Florida that could remove the firearm from an individual like that. So we were calling for changing the law to pass a red flag law to do that. And time again, as we were doing this, we would hear from people. Can you hear me now? Great. We would hear from people, oh, it's terrible what happened to you kids, but you don't understand. This is Florida. Gun laws get weaker here. They don't get stronger here. And it's great that you care, but nothing's going to change. And we did, as all good teenagers do, the opposite of what we were told. And decided to start organizing and protesting and said, okay, watch us. So we showed up by the thousands with my friend Jackie Corin, organizing hundreds and hundreds of students to get on buses in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, just in the days afterwards, to show up at our state legislature that had just ruled one of the biggest public health epidemics to our state was pornography. I kid you not. That was what they were legislating on when the shooting happened. Not the AR-15s that were killing our kids. But as Jackie was organizing them, we had all these students showing up by the thousands at our state legislature. And despite what all those naysayers said, we actually did change things in Florida. We raised the age to buy a gun to 21 in our state, despite it being controlled by Republicans. And we passed a red flag law. And I've seen the impact of these laws personally. Because I hear all the time, as I'm sure you all do, as many of you being advocates, if not all of you, there's this concept that, criminals don't obey laws, so why have gun laws in the first place? And it's like, by that logic, why have any laws at all, right? And the reality is, a lot of the people that are committing these acts of gun violence, they are criminals. All of them are criminals, obviously, but they are not all masterminds. Like the shooter at my high school was not a mastermind. Sometimes they also are older men. Like one man that sent a death threat to my mother that said, F with the NRA and you will be DOA. We used the law that we passed after Parkland to disarm the man that threatened to kill my mother. Had we not had the audacity to believe that change was actually possible and the ferocity to make it possible, my mom might not be alive right now because that man lived about 20 minutes away from us. That same law has been used over 19,000 times since the shooting in Parkland to disarm people that are at risk to themselves and others. And guess who uses it most? Republican sheriffs, because it works. And not even Ron DeSantis has been able to repeal those laws because they're popular and they're effective. And after we were working on that, we said, well, what else can we do? So we looked at the civil rights movement. And specifically, we looked at student walkouts that happened in response originally, not even just to the broader civil rights movement, but specifically to discrimination that Chicano students in Los Angeles were facing throughout the 50s and 60s. Took inspiration from that. We decided that we're going to walk out of our schools. So when we started organizing this, then all of a sudden a couple dozen schools were like, hey, we want to walk out too. And then a couple hundred schools were like, hey, we want to walk out too. And then thousands of schools were saying they wanted to walk out. We ended up having the largest student walkout ever in American history with it was more than that. It was hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million young people walking out of their schools to demand action on gun violence. And as we were working on that, we said, you know what else they did in the civil rights movement? They had a march. So let's have a march to show the public support for this issue. And we thought that we were going to get like 90 people to Washington, D.C. when we were first organizing this. And then when we put out the RSVP, we had within the first day, I think it was over 100,000 people that signed up to join us for this march. And then by a month before, it was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of more people who were signing up to join. And we had people come to us that said, well, I can't make it to DC. Can we organize one in our own city? We said, sure, of course. So then we had sister marches. And eventually, about a month and a half after the shooting, we ended up having the largest youth protest in American history with over 800,000 people marching in Washington, D.C. and 800 sister marches around the country. And one of the largest, not even just youth protests in American history, but one of the largest protests ever in American history. But we didn't just march. We also registered people to vote because we heard from a lot of boomers, no offense, that, it's terrible what happened to you kids, but you know what the real problem is? Like, you guys just don't vote. Young people just don't vote. And like, if you're going to change this, you need them to vote. And we're like, okay, we'll do that. So we registered tens of thousands of young people to vote. And we also decided to do a bus tour around the country, taking further inspiration from the civil rights movement. And it actually started here in Chicago on the south side I think it was on the west side. My geography is a little bit rusty on Chicago at St. Sabina. Thank you. And as we were organizing, with a lot of local communities and other groups like that, not only to raise money for them as we went around the country supporting these young people and registering people to vote, we had counter protesters that were following us. And one of them, they had a armored Humvee that they would follow us in with a turret with a machine gun on top of it. That wasn't an actual machine gun, but it was powered by propane to sound like a machine gun in order to try to trigger these young people who literally have PTSD from shooting. And when they tried to show up to counter protest us at St. Sabina, they were actually so scared they left because there's so much fear mongering constantly that happens about Chicago and on Fox News and everything like that. And eventually those guys followed a bunch of our students around the country for a lot of the tour. And eventually they ended up getting arrested on gun and drug possession charges, which they were not supposed to have. And as part of the work that we did with March for Our Lives, one of the things that we were very intentional about was making sure people understood this was not just Parkland. As important what happened to us was, this happens every day across the country, even if it's not in the form of a mass shooting. Exactly. But communities like Parkland get a disproportionate amount of attention. But what we weren't going to do is we weren't going to come to Chicago and say, hey, you know what we're going to do is tell you how to solve gun violence here, obviously. So we wanted to talk to people like Alex King, Trey Bosley, and so many other people from around Chicago and say, we're going on this tour around the country. We want to incorporate you in it and have you talk about your experience. If that's something you want to do, you don't have to, but we know that we can't speak for any other community other than Parkland. So would you join us in this tour? And that's part of what we did is we went around the country, and a lot of the places that we were speaking at, we would pick up other young people that were advocates against gun violence and they would go and join us to speak at different town halls in different congressional districts around the country. And in one of these congressional districts, we were particularly popular in Dallas, Texas. That's sarcasm. And at this protest that we were doing, or not, it wasn't even a protest, it was a town hall. We were just talking about what we went through and what we were advocating for. There was a group of about 40 armed counter-protesters that showed up, screaming that, in particular, that I was a crisis actor, that I was here to take everybody's guns, that I was paid by the government to take people's guns and everything. Because Alex Jones had spread all these conspiracy theories. He even made a whole show about me and how I was a paid actor by the government to take people's guns, which resulted in thousands of death threats that my family got and I got, and then my house eventually getting swatted too. And I actually went out and talked to these people because I knew that I couldn't, our other students were actively being endangered by me being there because of all the disinformation and lies that had been spread about me. So I went out and talked to them and I said, why are you here right now? And they said, well, it's because you're here to take my guns. And the guy I was talking to had an AR-15. It might have been an AR-10. I honestly forget. It was 7 years ago now. But it was some kind of semi-automatic rifle similar to an AR platform. And he says, well, you're here to take my guns. I said, well, you're trying to hurt yourself or somebody else? And he says, no. And I said, well, great. Then I'm not here to take your guns. And if I was, it'd be through a hearing where you got a chance to kind of, defend yourself and say why you shouldn't have this happen. But let me ask you this. Do you think, if let's say there's a 19-year-old in your community that threatens to shoot up your high school, do you think that 19-year-old should have an AR-15? He's like, no, of course not. And I said, well, great. Then you agree with me. And then by the end of this conversation, of course, he didn't agree with me on everything, but he ended up crying because he realized that the kids that he was protesting, I mean, we were barely adults. I had just turned 18, but the young people he was protesting really were just young people that didn't want their friends to die in their schools or communities anymore. And from that, I realized how much of the hatred on this issue is driven just by a lack of education and the propaganda that fills that space and people being intentionally misinformed about what we want to do. And this ridiculous assertion that we are so divided on this issue in our country that we can't do anything about it, when there was actually a lot that we do agree on that we are not doing about it. And throughout that tour, we would register voters because we were going to districts where if we turned out enough young people to vote, just slightly more, that we could defeat NRA-backed incumbents. And that is just what we did. We ended up having one of the highest youth voter turnouts ever in American history, actually higher than any of the boomers who criticized us for not voting when they were our age. Fun fact, no offense, guys. But also, we defeated more NRA-backed incumbents than ever before in American history through that process. As part of that, too, we also sent a letter to Attorney General Tish James about the NRA and their use of 501c3 dollars to fund things like Armani suits and private jet travel and other things like that for their multimillionaire CEO that they were paying, which, by the way, you're not supposed to do with charitable donations. And because they were incorporated in New York and March for Our Lives had some really great tax lawyers that worked with us, we were able to take him down like Al Capone by using taxes. And he ended up getting removed from the NRA because of that. And they've since lost about 1 million members in the time since, and they've increasingly become irrelevant. Eventually, though, after that tour, I had to go to college. But before I went to college, I took a gap year. And as part of that gap year, I worked with some of my friends and experts from actually around here in Chicago, people like Nina Vinnick and Scott Wang and others. And we came up with this idea of creating a very ambitious plan to support gun safety, to get one of the presidential candidates in the primary to adopt in order to push all of the candidates to be way better on the issue because they all sucked, frankly. They were nowhere near as good as I thought they needed to be. And as part of this plan, we wrote into it creating an Office of Gun Violence Prevention at the White House because we wanted to make sure that there was a central place where we were able to coordinate the federal government's response to gun violence instead of it just being a mishmash of several dozen agencies and a couple $2 billion that were just thrown willy-nilly around the country, and make it really targeted to make sure that the money, our money that we are paying for in the form of taxes, is actually being used to combat gun violence and not just sitting there on the sidelines. And eventually this plan got adopted by a lot of the candidates as part of their platform. And then I went to college. And when I was in college, I was struggling a little bit, not only because of, frankly, my own PTSD, not just from the shooting, but just as much, frankly, from the aftermath and everything that happened from, having people follow me, from the death threats to what my family went through and everything like that, and working so hard because we really did believe that it was all on us to end gun violence because of so many people around the country saying, thank God you kids are here to save us. And it took a lot. for me to get through that. I was not sleeping well when I was in school, and I knew that I couldn't continue doing this work and I needed to step back from it in order to take care of myself. And one of the reasons I also had to do that, this one is more funny, is that I'm dyslexic and I had to take a Spanish class, full immersion Spanish class in order to graduate. Don't ask me to speak in Spanish. I barely passed. But as I was doing that, I called up my friend Maxwell, who had helped us organize a bunch of marches around the country and that tour that we did. And I said, Maxwell, I'd love if you took this job to be our organizing director at March for Our Lives, because I need to focus on school and I need to take a step back so that I can take care of myself, because I can't do this right now. And he's like, I understand that, but I have a job right now and I'm pretty committed to it, so I can't do that. And I was like, I understand. And then the next day I flunked a Spanish test. And I called Max and I said, you don't understand. I really need to pass the Spanish class and I need you to take this job. And he said, all right, I'll take the job. So Maxwell took the job, and his first assignment with us was to organize a lobbying day at the Virginia State Legislature. This was the first time in about a decade, because Virginia has off-year elections. This was the first time in about a decade that it was going to be possible for us to change gun laws in the state. At the time, most of March for Our Lives chapters were based in high schools. And our students who were planning on showing up by the hundreds and lobbying to change gun laws started receiving death threats, saying, if you show up here, we're going to kill you and all this other stuff. And Maxwell calls me and he says, David, we just can't do this because we can't endanger our students' lives and everything like that. And I said, I understand. What if, instead of having high school students show up, whose parents are understandably unwilling to risk their children's lives to do this as much as those kids themselves might want to do it, what if we got college students from around Virginia to show up? And to deal with those death threats, what if we called up some of the Virginia state legislators that we know and we asked them if our college students could spend the night on their legislative office floor the night before the armed counter-protesters were planning on showing up, with Alex Jones spearheading that effort, with 20,000 armed counter-protesters expected to arrive. Many of them associated with white supremacist groups. I can't say officially that they were all neo-Nazis, but when you're standing around a bunch of people waving white power flags and swastikas, I think it's safe to say you're guilty by association. Nonetheless, Maxwell says to me, he's like, you're crazy, that's never going to work, but fine, we'll try. So he calls them up and then it works. And these students end up in collaboration with survivors from Virginia Tech and other instances of thousands of instances of gun violence around Virginia, end up passing some of the first gun laws in decades, in over a decade in that state. And a few more years go by, and Maxwell calls me up. And in the time since, the president President Biden was elected, and I was negotiating with them all the time with our team at March for Our Lives about creating the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Because there was a lot of internal conflict about creating that office for dumb political reasons that I'm not going to get into. But nonetheless, there was a vicious debate going on, you could say, with me often meeting with them over Zoom from my dorm room saying why they needed to create this office. And eventually, as I'm having those conversations, Maxwell calls me and he says, David, I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is I'm leaving March for Our Lives. And I say, Maxwell, it's okay. I passed my Spanish class. The good news is I'm going to run for Congress. And I sit there in my dorm room and I'm thinking, are you even old enough? Because I'm like, I'm pretty sure you have to be 25 to be elected to the House, if I read the Constitution correctly. And he's like, yes, I'll be old enough by the time I'm elected. And I said, well, I'm glad you're better at math than I am at Spanish. And at this point, I had never really supported anybody running for office because there are so many politicians after the shooting that are like, oh my God, can you guys endorse me? Can you do this? And I didn't want, the truth of the matter is we have been failed by both parties in different ways, and certainly at different levels, to address this issue. And we didn't want to just go out there and say like, oh, it's going to be fine if you just vote for one party. When the reality is we have been failed so many times over and over and over again. We've had multiple Democratic and Republican trifectas throughout my life, and we are still here, right? And I didn't want politicians who got endorsed by us. I wanted politicians who endorsed us as the movement. But with Maxwell, I didn't see him as a politician. I saw him as a friend. And I said, I'm going to do everything I can to support you. So Maxwell, while he was running, he doesn't come from a super wealthy family or anything like that. He had to Uber drive every night from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. as he was running for Congress. And he was also running against two former members of Congress. One had committed tax fraud while they were in Congress, just what we need more of. And the other was a hedge fund manager while they were in Congress. Sometimes Florida politics and Chicago politics feel kind of similar. But nonetheless, Maxwell ended up having a huge upset in that race and winning to become the first Gen Z member of Congress. And the first bill that Maxwell introduced was to create the Office of Gun Violence Prevention to help push the White House to create that office. And then conveniently, there was a leadership change within the White House staff with somebody who was much more supportive at the same time of creating that office. And we created, within a year of Maxwell being elected, and even before I had graduated college, I found myself sitting in the Rose Garden at the White House to watch the President of the United States be introduced by Congressman Maxwell Frost for the announcement of the creation of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention at the White House. And that office ended up playing a really integral role because shortly after, in my junior year of college in 2022, there was, right when I got back from college, or right as I was starting summer break, the Buffalo massacre happened. Where, just as a refresher, a self-declared white supremacist went and murdered people specifically because they were black. He said this in his manifesto. This is not hyperbole. This is just fact. This is what he said. And the media went out there and they said, this is a real mental health problem over and over again, as if, hatred is a mental illness. And I could go on a whole rant about that, but I'm going to save it. As I was going up there, I was helping to do food distribution with some of our team at March for Our Lives, and my friend Greg Jackson, who is part of this group called Community Justice Action Fund that specifically works to help support violence intervention programs and other programs to combat gun violence by stopping predominantly younger people from wanting to pick up a firearm in the first place to use it to solve their problems. And after Greg and I were, after we did a lot of that food distribution, I had to drive all the way back to DC. It was a 9-hour drive. So we spent 9 hours in the car together, and he ended up becoming, later on, the Deputy Director of Gun Violence Prevention at the White House. So that was a really serendipitous moment. Part of the reason this office became especially important, though, was because after the Buffalo and Uvalde massacres, once again, we heard from people, well, this is just how it is. Nothing's going to change. And this is just a fact of life of living in America. And what we did is we went out to the top 10 senators that needed to have the most pressure applied to them, to their offices in their districts. This is how I spent my junior year of summer in college. Very, very fun, obviously. Going out to places like Dallas, Texas, to protest in front of John Cornyn's office, to pressure them with teachers, nurses, and others, and students to take action on gun violence. And when I was in Dallas, for the first time that I'd ever been in Texas, out of the dozens of times that I had been there in the years after the shooting, for the first time, I did not see a single armed counter-protester. And I thought to myself, this time's going to be different. It's going to be different. And I said that over and over again. And that's why I knew, because there wasn't 40, there wasn't even one that was protesting us. And miraculously, despite those naysayers and the many cynics that are out there, Congress actually did something for once. They expanded background checks for people under the age of 21 attempting to buy guns like the AR-15. And they also spent billions of dollars to help support school mental health programs as well. That sense has been used to hire over 10,000 school mental health professionals to help support our students that have such high rates of anxiety and depression. And they put hundreds of millions of dollars into funding violence intervention programs as well across the country. And that law was far from perfect. It was far from everything that I would have wanted, but it's a hell of a lot better than the track that we had been on previously. And this Office of Gun Violence Prevention helped to oversee the implementation of that billions of dollars, to call up state governments and say, hey, actually, did you know that there's a very simple process for you to apply for several $100 million or a couple $1 million for your municipality to fund a violence intervention program or fund a red flag law program or expand your background check process for gun purchasers under the age of 21? And since that office was created, they saw the largest 1 and 2 year reductions in gun homicides ever in American history, of about 25% in total over the course of 2 years, which is nowhere near enough to be clear, but it's a hell of a lot better than the track that we were on previously. They also went after a lot of websites that were selling these devices that I know, unfortunately, many of you are familiar with, called Glock switches, that effectively turn handguns into machine guns. They shut down about 300 of those websites, and what they found was really remarkable. Many of them were not actually hosted in the United States. Their websites were hosted in China and Russia, where our adversaries they don't have to actively pull the trigger themselves if they can fuel the war that we are fueling ourselves at home. And thankfully, they've shut down a lot of those websites. But in the time since, despite all the reductions, despite all the efficiencies that they helped to streamline within the federal government and creating a better data collection system to actually know what the rates of gun violence are and how to immediately respond as things are taking off in some communities, so they can have a more rapid response, that office has since been abolished by the Trump administration. Which is crazy, right? The Office of Gun Violence Prevention. That literally was just making sure that we were enforcing laws that we already had on the books and making sure that we were actually telling states, hey, you have a couple, you have $10 or $20 million available for free to take from the federal government to enforce the laws that you already have on the books. 3 people. That's all that was hired to do that work. 3 people. It was 2 deputy directors and an assistant. And I don't know about you all, but I want to make sure if we allocate billions of dollars to fight a specific issue like gun violence, that there are some people whose sole job it is to make sure that money is actually used and do everything they can to streamline that process. And after Maxwell was elected and after that office was created, knowing the challenges of how hard it was for Maxwell to get elected, I thought to myself, this is amazing, but we need way more people like Maxwell to get elected, because not everybody can afford to Uber drive from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. every night while they're running for Congress, let alone have the money to actually fund their campaigns. So with his campaign manager, I started an organization called Leaders We Deserve that helps elect young people to state legislatures and Congress around the country, with the philosophy being, if our government doesn't change gun laws, I think it's time we change who's in government and bring in some better people, right? Especially younger people that, I don't know if you've seen Congress lately, are desperately needed. And understand the anxiety of what it's like to go through a school shooter drill. President Biden's generation, they didn't go through school shooter drills, but they did go through they did go through nuclear bomb drills. And that generation went on to pass some of the largest nuclear arms reduction treaties in human history and pull our world back from the brink of apocalypse. The difference is, for our generation, the bomb is going off multiple times a year in the form of these shootings. And it feels, I would argue, in many ways, far more real for these young people. And I think it is going to take bringing in that generation that understands that anxiety, because it doesn't matter if you're, a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, or you're nothing when you're a young person. All of us are going through that anxiety. All of us have that thought rush through our head when we go into a movie theater to figure out where the nearest exit is. All of us have that question of how are we gonna fit ourselves under our desk, or what are we gonna do if there's somebody who comes through that door? And that's just what we did. So when we launched it, we took a huge risk. I had just graduated college and I was living out of a friend's basement because we didn't have any money when we were starting the organization. And we ended up launching it in between both of Donald Trump's indictments. That is a crazy sentence to say about a sitting president. But we launched it in between both of Donald Trump's indictments, and we ended up raising about $11.5 million to support young people running for state legislature and Congress last election. And the work that we're doing is highlighted very well by one candidate in particular. Um, one of the young people that got involved with March for Our Lives in 2018 was a young man named Bryce Berry, who helped lead the March for Our Lives in his community when he was 17 years old. Bryce then went to college, he graduated, and then he decided to become a teacher in downtown Atlanta. He's a seventh grade algebra teacher. And one day he found out that one of his students, unfortunately, had witnessed his father get shot and killed in front of him. And this student was in class the next day. And when he asked the student how he was doing, the student said, "Oh, it's fine. This happens every day." Because that's how normalized gun violence is there. And Bryce looked at who was representing him, and it was somebody that had flipped to become a supporter of the NRA. And he said, "You know what? I can't do enough to protect my students just teaching. I need to do more for them. So I'm going to run for state legislature." And he was 22 years old when he threw his hat in the ring. He decides to run, and he ends up winning to become the youngest person ever elected in Georgia state history. And guess what? The NRA convention is now being held in his own district. And he's planning a counter protest against it. And part of the work that we do too is to help elect young people, that give other young people faith that there are people that can represent them. Because I think the biggest cause of the failure of our political system, more than anything, far more than even the structures itself, it's the belief that change isn't possible. And that applies to gun violence, that applies to a whole litany of issues that our country faces. And that's part of the reason why our candidates, when they're running for office, they have to agree to not take corporate money. So that when we give them, if we're going to give you several $100,000, that we're here to support your campaign, but we're not here to support some corporate sellout, right? That doesn't actually represent the people. And one time we did this with a candidate in Dallas, Texas, who was running against a member of the same party, the Democratic Party, who had voted to arm teachers as a Democrat and voted to give them $25,000 for being armed. Texas. And our candidate was a staunch abortion rights advocate and outsider. Her name's Molly Cook. And she had done a lot of work in the city as well on activism to stop further highway expansions. I don't know if you've ever been to Houston, but it is a highway. It is a highway and a city rather than a city with highways. And Molly was seen as a huge outsider, and very few people had faith that she could win. And we came in and we supported her with $300,000. We went and knocked on doors in the district as well. And one of the doors that I knocked on was supposed to be of a 6-year-old woman named Lisa. And it ended up being a 20-year-old guy that answered the door named Kai. And Kai was shirtless and he had gaming headphones on. And he literally says to me, "Sup?" And I'm like, "Hey, have you heard about this candidate? She supports such and such and such and such." And he's like, "Oh, that's cool. But what corporations are funding her campaign?" That was his first question to me. And I say, "None, because she's a Leaders We Deserve endorsed candidate." And I explained how we worked. And he's like, well, who's funding her campaign then? And I said, "I am. Leaders We Deserve is," because we were our biggest contributor. And we're funded by small dollar donors around the country. And he's like, "Oh, that's cool. Can I even vote in this election?" And I was like, "Are you registered to vote?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Then you can vote." And I talked to him a little more and I said, "Do you have any more questions?" He's like, "Yeah, I have a few more questions." I said, "Well, if you give me your phone number and you take your gaming headphones off, you will get a call in the next 30 minutes from the candidate to answer any questions you have." He said, "Okay, cool." So the election comes and goes. And I text him after the election. I say, "Hey, did you get a chance to vote?" And he said, "Yes, I did. Thank you so much." I said, "Well, thank you. Because you just elected the youngest state senator in Texas by being her 62nd vote in that election. So don't let anybody tell you that your vote doesn't count. It really does." And we did that with young people around the country this past election cycle, electing them in states like Virginia, states like North Carolina, and elsewhere where they've helped to break majorities and supermajorities to ensure that we're able to stop bad gun legislation from being passed and pass good legislation in states like Virginia, where we were able to gain a majority. And that's the work that I continue to do to this day, bringing those young people that marched with us after the shooting into office, because I'm tired of seeing the same faces that don't do the right thing or don't fight hard enough for us. And I'm determined to bring these young people in to be the change that we desperately need to see. I think as it aims to the future of the movement, we have to break through this false dichotomy that we can only focus on how somebody gets a gun. And that's part of the reason why I'm so glad that so many incredible violence interrupters are here. We need to talk about why are our young people picking up or any people of any age, but predominantly it's young people that are committing these acts of gun violence, why do they feel the need to pick up a firearm in the first place? Because let's be clear, the reason why communities like Parkland don't have shootings on a daily basis isn't just because it's certainly not because Florida has the strongest gun laws in the country, right? It's because we have some of the most resources. Most parents in our community are making six figures. Our school is one of the best funded in the state. It has some of the most resources of any school in the state. And nothing prevents gun violence like opportunity. We know the biggest predictor of where gun violence occurs in this country is where communities were redlined by the federal government throughout the 30s and 40s. It's because poverty and gun violence are deeply intertwined. And we have to do so much more, not only to address the gun homicides that are happening, that are driven oftentimes by a lot of our young people not having support after a loved one has been shot or they have been shot, and not having somebody there to console them and stop the retaliation from happening nearly enough. But making sure that we're also addressing the roughly 2/3 of gun deaths that don't get talked about at all, which are gun suicides as well, which are preventable, contrary to popular belief, and increasingly are happening and disproportionately affecting our young people because of the mental health crisis that they're going through, in part because of these awful things. And just for some context on that, the reason why that's so important is because we know from statistics that women attempt suicide about 3 times more than men. But men are about 3 times more successful. And it's typically because of easy access to more lethal means like firearms. If you survive your first suicide attempt, about 90% of the time, you do not reattempt. And it's easy for people to say, well, if somebody's going to do that, they're just going to do that. But that is very myopic and it doesn't tell the full story. Because people who try the most common attempt, typically, which is overdosing, they typically, the vast majority of the time, they end up surviving, thankfully. You don't get that chance with a firearm, though. And there's so much more work that we need to do on that. And I think part of the work that the movement needs to do too, in our government, but the government's not going to do crap right now because of who's in power. What our government eventually needs to do, at least at the state level, and in places where the gun safety movement does have majorities, is figure out what do violence intervention programs for gun suicides look like, and intervening in moments of mental health crisis to help people. Because the demographic that is dying most from gun suicide in this country are actually older to middle-aged white men in rural and suburban communities that are often dying from deaths of despair, isolation, and loneliness. And I'm tired of us just talking about, well, we should only talk about how does somebody get a gun. That is obviously the most important thing in my view. And I think one of the most effective ways of combating it. But let me be clear. Even if a young person isn't able to get an AR-15 or a handgun and they still have a knife and they're going to go and stab someone, that is still a problem, obviously. It's obviously better not to have a mass casualty event like happened in Parkland. But if there's still that intent, if there's still that hatred that drives somebody to harm somebody else, that is still a problem that we have to address. And we have to address this in 2 ways, right? When people talk about what causes an instance of gun violence, you have to have the capability and you have to have the intent to hurt somebody. We can't just focus on the capability. We need to also focus on the intent and what drives our young people to do that. Because we know in most major cities, it's less than 5,000 people that are the most likely to be both the victims and the perpetrators of gun violence. And if we can get good wraparound social services around them, not only can we save a hell of a lot of lives, we also can save in a not to make a cold argument here, but a hell of a lot of money for the government at the same time by not having them to do all these investigations because there are less shootings, not having to incarcerate people. That also destroys families, that destroys a community, that severely harms people and costs us millions of dollars for decades to keep somebody incarcerated like that. If we can just invest a little bit more in our education system, in our food programs to make sure that young people are able to feed themselves, in our programs to make sure that if there's a young person that's experienced gun violence, that they're able to get counseling and mental health support from people that also look like them, that are from their community, that are there to support them and guide them through the healing process so that they don't feel the need to perpetuate the cycle of trauma that drives gun violence. The last thing I want to say to you all is the importance of remembering, even as hard as this is in this moment, given everything that our country is going through right now, is to remember that joy is not antithetical to resistance. It is an essential part of it, as hard as it might feel sometimes going through this. And I know that myself, not only because of what we went through, but because of the onslaught of attacks that we faced after the shooting, where people would say to us, we would take a photo with somebody after a shooting, after the shooting, where this person would come up to us and they would say, "Well, I'm so thankful for the work that you guys are doing. You're really amazing," and so on and so forth. And what do you do in a photo? You naturally smile, right? No matter really what you got through, you smile. And that's what we did. And then we would have memes made of us saying, "This is the face that you make when you're standing on the bodies of your dead classmates." And what that instilled in us was the idea that it wasn't okay for us to ever be happy again. And it was a form of psychological warfare against us, because in order for us to create change, as I learned from Dolores Huerta when I was at a protest with her, one of the most important things that you can do to create change is to make people believe that change is actually possible. And in order to do that, you don't need to have a ton of hope, but you need to have at least some that it actually is possible. And the only way you're going to have that is if you have some amount of joy, so that it doesn't feel like everything is a total loss and we're failing and nothing's ever going to get better in the first place. And in the past, what I used to do was to say, it's not okay to be happy. It's not okay to smile. It's not okay to feel joy because of what I've gone through or what my classmates have gone through. And that's an easy trap to fall into, because it feels like, well, if I'm not sacrificing, if I'm not exhausted, I'm not working hard enough. But we all need to make sure that we know that this movement is not reliant on any single person, because it's a movement. It's reliant on people. And I can know that I can take a step back because you all are doing the work when I can't. And you all know that you can take a step back when you can't do the work, because I'm doing the work when you can't. Because there's no way we'll ever know all of each other in this movement, but we can see the effects of it. And the last story with this that I want to tell you is the way that I learned this was after the Uvalde shooting. Some of the parents asked me and another survivor from Parkland to come there. And they said to us, they did a huge protest where they were working on holding the police that did absolutely nothing there accountable. And we did this huge march around Uvalde in the middle of South Texas in the summer. It was like 112 degrees for like 4 miles. I got very sunburned and we were exhausted. But afterwards, instead of just going back to my hotel room and being sad as I would have done in the past, I said to my friend from Parkland and some of the other organizers that we were with, I said, "This is obviously a really hard day. You know what we're going to do though? We're going to go out and we're going to have some Mexican food. And we're going to drive like 30 minutes outside of town and we're just going to go stargazing. And we're going to look at the stars and we're not going to talk about any of this." Because if you are only working with each other in the wake of a shooting or a mass shooting or a school whatever it is, in the gun safety movement, you are going to come to hate each other a lot of the time. Because you can do everything right, and oftentimes you are doing everything right, but you still won't be able to make the change that you need because the stars have not aligned politically or societally in order to be able to make that change. But the importance is that you have to build up the endurance to keep going and the grit to keep going and not stop trying. Because you can fail a million times and succeed once, and then you've succeeded, right? And what I've had to do a lot of work of is to actively, effectively Pavlov myself and my fellow activists into liking each other and making sure that we're getting food, making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, and that we're not letting the trauma that is the single strongest thing about this movement that motivates us to do so much also be our greatest weakness at the same time. So please take care of yourselves and know that it's not reliant on any single one of you. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, David. My name's Olivia Osola. I'm a senior public health major here at Loyola. I'm one of the undergraduate fellows. We're going to move into our Q&A section. So if you want to write on your note card and pass it to the end, 2 of the fellows will be coming around to collect those, and we'll read them for David to answer for the rest of the time. Thank you.
help your local violence intervention programs. And don't tell them what you're going to do for them. Don't go to them and be like, hey, this is what I'm going to do for you. Just ask them what you can do to support them. And sometimes they might tell you it's nothing, and that is okay. Listen to them. But if there is something that you can do, no matter what it is, if it's, moving a chair or getting water or just being used as an intern or raising money, whatever it is, support your local violence intervention programs and do everything that you can to help them. Obviously, I would say vote as well as part of that. And then two, consider running for office. And if your local elected officials are not getting enough support to violence intervention programs, be the change and challenge that elected official, even if you don't win, solely on the cause of being better on gun safety and getting more support to them. So that's what I would say. Great question. Well, it's certainly not because I love politicians. Why the hell would I be involved in party politics when everything is such a shit show? To make it as succinct as possible. Yeah, I ask myself the same question. I believe that it goes back to why I decided to run in the first place. And it's because I was saying throughout the election, I think we got a real youth voter problem over and over and over and over and over again. And I was not listened to, even despite the fact that I raised over $1 million for the campaign as well, which was just enraging. And when I was at a lot of DNC meetings, if you ever want to go to one of the most exciting events of your life, you can attend a DNC meeting. They're publicly available, so you can attend just as a member of the public. And at one of these meetings, it was the one right after the election, and they were talking about why we lost. And they're like, the pollster said the first thing that she brought up was 18 to 29-year-old voters. And I looked around the room, and I didn't see anybody under the age of 40 besides myself. And I said, I can complain on Twitter all I want. But who am I if I see this opportunity for me to be part of the change that I want to see, to not take this and try to do something with it? Because things don't usually get better just by complaining about them, unfortunately. We'd have a much better world if that was the case. They get better by making them better and being the change that you want to see. So I decided to throw my hat in the ring, not because I love the Democratic Party or I think we're God's greatest gift ever by any means. It's because I believe in the party that we can be. And it's also because of the incredible work that has been done for decades previously, where at every turn in my life, I have been helped by the policies that we have passed. When I was younger and my mom needed to go on and protest with her teachers union for a raise, that collective bargaining was enabled by Democrats. When my father faced the unfortunate consequences of getting diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's disease when I was in 5th grade, he had the generosity of Social Security there to support him. That was a product of our party creating that. And he was able to keep his insurance because he didn't get kicked off because he had a pre-existing condition. That is because of the work that our party has done. And it's not to say that we're perfect by any means, but it's to say, I want to build a better party that we all know that it could be, but it currently is not right now. And the way that that's going to happen is not by just saying everything sucks and both sides are the same, and I'm just not going to engage, because that's the easy thing to do. But that's not going to be the thing that fixes it. It's going to have to be all of us stepping in and being the change that we want to see in the first place and figuring out what actually can we do to make this better. So that's why I did that. It also gives me a bigger platform to be critical, frankly. I think that's a small part of the conversation that we should be having. I think overall we know that when there are guns added into any situation, it turns what otherwise would have been just potentially a fist fight into a shootout. And what really concerns me about the proliferation of so many, concealed carry permits and everything like that is in these situations, if everybody in this room was armed, and God forbid something happened, how do you tell who the shooter is? Right? Not to mention the fact of how hard it is to aim accurately at any sort of distance with a handgun and the level of training that is required to be able to do that, let alone being able to do it in an active shooter situation or something like that. So I think all in all, they are very effective because they're able to reduce the likelihood that, being at your kid's school, if you have an argument with the teacher or another parent, that it's going to turn into a potential shootout rather than you guys just physically fighting, for example. So that would be my viewpoint on it. I think a lot of yeah. That's a great question. So that's made difficult in part by a lot of something called preemption. What issues should we focus on? What gun violence prevention measures should we focus on at a local level, right? I think the main stuff that we can focus on at the local level is making sure that we're focused on the intent side of things. So making sure that we have the best social services available to those that are most likely to be the victims and or perpetrators of gun violence, because there's a lot of crossover within that group, is going to be what we can do, in part because the NRA has passed in most states laws where it is illegal for local municipalities to pass gun ordinances. They're called preemption laws. So locally, a lot of it's going to be figuring out how you can support programs that basically get people the help that they need, whether it's getting a job, getting therapy, getting whatever social services they need so they don't feel the need to pick up a firearm in the first place. And I know that's not a super sexy answer that's going to solve everything, but that really is a lot of it. Even if everybody in this country, had easy access to firearms, if we're able to stop them from wanting to go and use those in bad ways, that's still progress, right? So that's what I would think about. Awesome. Cool. Go ahead. For sure. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily agree on the gun-free zone aspect, because I think there's a broader conversation that has to be had about the overall costs of having that. And also, but it's not to say that I'm against anybody having firearms at all. The work that I've done, a lot of it is taught, when I was in college, I joined the shooting club. It's not because I was very popular there. Right? It's because I like to talk to people who don't agree with me. And I want everybody to feel safe. I want you to feel safe, but I also want my classmates to feel safe. And I think both of those things are possible. We just need to have a higher standard of regulation around that. In states like Massachusetts, for example, they have a very stringent system of firearm ownership, where if you want to get a gun, you need to do basically a similar process to getting a car. It needs to be registered. You need to get a license for it. You need to be trained with it. You need to do all that stuff. They have a gun death rate 70% lower than the rest of the country. Of course, not every state is Massachusetts by any means at all. But the fact of the matter is, last year in Boston, they had 24 gun homicides in a city of over 600,000 people. That's pretty remarkable. that is not because they just had everybody have easy access to firearms or they got rid of gun-free zones. But I understand what you're saying on that. I think the question that we have to address is for the people that are most likely to be those perpetrators of gun violence, it's a couple thousand people in most major cities like Chicago. What can we do ahead of time to help those young people not feel the need to use a firearm against somebody? It's not going to be perfect by any means. And part of the challenge with this work is you are not going to hear about the shooting that doesn't happen because of a gun-free zone, right? You're just not. But what you are going to hear about is the time, well, oh, there was a gun-free zone there and somebody, was able to use their firearm to protect someone, but you're not going to hear about the times that things didn't happen. That's part of the major challenge that we have to do in the gun safety movement is it's hard for me to talk about, well, out of those 19,000 people in Florida that had their firearms removed from them because they, for example, threatened to kill their neighbor or threatened to shoot up a high school, how many of those actually did save lives? I can't know. I don't have a crystal ball with a parallel universe with all the exact same variables to prove that. But it's to say that I think universally, even if you don't agree with the gun-free zone side of things, I'm sure you do agree that we need to fund more programs that stop those young people from wanting to pick up a firearm in the first place. And I'll tell you this much, it's not going to be perfect. There are 450 million guns in this country. There will always be shootings in this country so long as we have that high level of firearms here. But I think there's a hell of a lot more work that we can do to stop people from wanting to hurt each other in the first place that we're not doing right now nearly enough. And let me just say one other thing on that point. I do think if you want to have a firearm in order to protect yourself or somebody else, I think it is essential that there are stringent training requirements around that for you to have that firearm. Because I know myself, regularly shooting firearms myself, it is a hell of a task to be able to shoot accurately using, I presume you're talking about having a handgun. Right. Good. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, but the fact of the matter is in many states, they don't have those same requirements either. And that really concerns me because think about this, right? If you're shooting anything that with that firearm that's more than, I would say like probably 5 or 10 feet in front of you, from your average person that isn't a marksman like yourself, it's going to be very hard for them to shoot accurately, and they're more likely to shoot somebody, I would argue, next to them, if it's on a thing like a train, for example, than to actually shoot the thing that they're shooting at. And also, what's to say for law enforcement who the actual shooter is in that situation? So, but that's why we need more training around it. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, David. We really appreciate you coming here and being so interactive with our crowd today. It means a lot. We're going to take a very prompt 5-minute break and start right after that 5 minutes. So make sure you're back in time. Thank you.
Back, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the wonderful presentation from David Hogg. My name is Mariah Hewley, and I am a Loyola Stance Fellow. I am honored to be presenting our next local advocate against gun violence for our next session. Afterwards, we'll do the same thing. We'll take questions. If you have note cards that were provided at check-in, you can go ahead and pass those down, and then we can try and get those answered in a timely manner. I am honored to introduce our first local gun violence prevention organization, which is Chicago CRED. Chicago CRED is a nonprofit organization based in Chicago, aiming to prevent gun violence. Joining us today are Paul Robinson, C.W. Harris, and Rashad Bedingfield.
Hey, good evening, everyone. How are we doing? Nice. I'm Paul Robinson from Chicago CRED. This being a college, I thought it'd be good to start things off with a pop quiz. You guys ready? So David Hogg mentioned that the city of Boston had 24 homicides last year. My question for you, and turn to the person next to you, and you can gander a guess. You ready to turn to someone next to you? Is, what was the last year that the city of Chicago was below 400 homicides? Go ahead and gander a guess. All right. Here's the answer. 1965. So the first thing you need to know about Chicago gun violence is it's been a persistent problem for a very long time. Here's the second stat, though, that I'll throw out there. As we sit here this evening, right now, shootings in the city of Chicago are down 30% from last year. Yeah. At Chicago Cred, we're a community violence intervention program, and our singular mission is to try to to try to reduce shootings and homicides. And how we do that is by working with incredible young men like C-Dub and Rodney, who are going to meet soon, and provide them with resources and build relationships and provide opportunities. And I want to save most of our time tonight so you can hear their testimony. But before they come up, I'm just going to share a quick story with you. So this weekend on Sunday, like many of you, I was cleaning up around the house. In fact, I was washing a frying pan when my phone rang. And it was an outreach worker from Chicago Cred named Mike. And I picked up with soapy, you know, when you have the soapy hands and you put your phone by your ear. And I said, "What's up, Mike?" And he said, "One of our participants has been shot." And I asked what happened. And he said, armed gunmen came through their front door, charged past his little niece and nephew, ran into his bedroom with a .223, which is an automatic rifle, and shot him in his bed. He said, "I've been on the phone with the father for the last hour. He's irate. Tempers are running high. Rumors are swirling. And I'm really worried about retaliation, Paul." And then he asked me, "How soon can you get to the house to talk to the family?" And I said, "Text me the address. I'm on my way." I pulled up to the house on the south side about 45 minutes later. When I got there, Mike, the outreach worker, was already there. There was a large crowd outside. The young man's life coach, Jeremy, was already there. And a few seconds later, our founder, Arnie Duncan, pulled up and hopped out the car, and he was there too. It being a Sunday, none of us were on the clock, right? But everyone dropped what they were doing and were there to make sure the family and the young man had what he needed, and that Chicago Cred was doing everything in our power to stop the next shooting from happening. That was my Sunday this weekend. And that's what community violence intervention is all about. It's really difficult work. I've been to more funerals than I can count for young people who have been shot in the city and have passed away tragically from gun violence. But it's also the most rewarding work I've ever done in my entire life because we get to build transformative relationships with incredible young men like CW and Rodney, and we get to see them succeed every single day. So before I pass the mic to them, I have a call of action for the young people in the room, the college students. If you're sitting here, you must care deeply about gun violence prevention. And I invite you to learn more about our field, community violence intervention, because we're going to need young, smart, passionate people to help staff these agencies like Chicago Cred and the Firehouse Community Arts Center and help lead our city to a safer future. And if you want to learn more, go to our website or reach out to me. My email address, I give it to everybody, is paul@chicagocred.com. It's the simplest email address I've ever had. But without further ado, to share their story about being in the program, please give a huge round of applause for Rajan Benfield.
How y'all doing? My name is Rashawn Bedingfield. I'm 26. I got 4 kids, 3 sons and a daughter. I was actually in a program in like 2020, 2021. That's when I started. I actually just finished last year in November. Got my high school diploma. It was a hard journey before getting into Cred because at first I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. I didn't know like what my future hold. You know how everybody asks you like where you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years. Before Cred, I couldn't even give you that answer. I didn't even know what I'd be if I'd be alive the next day. So once I got in Cred, it showed me a difference between just talking and action. Because you could talk and tell somebody it's gonna be okay, we can help you, versus someone that's saying they're gonna do it and they really put the work in. So in 2021, I got shot in my face. I was in the car with my cousin. I had ended up getting shot. And once I got shot, everybody from the program literally was there. Arnie Duncan, Paul, my life coach, everybody. But 2022, I ended up getting shot in the stomach a day before my daughter's birthday. And that was like the most hardest day for me because me and my daughter were just on the phone earlier that day talking about how we gonna do this, how we gonna do that. So it really hurt her, but it hurt me more than it hurt her. I wouldn't say I could have prevented the situation, but I could have, how can I put it? I could have maneuvered different. I could have did things differently. But what really took the icing on the cake was in 2023 of April 28th, actually. I got shot 15 times. Somewhere where I used to hang with my friends and stuff at. It was basically, I wouldn't say wrong place at the wrong time. It was just decisions I made as far as in my life. I wouldn't say it caught up to me, but it was like, that was an eye opener because that's something that you see on a movie when you see somebody get shot that many times and survive and go through the healing process. But I know what I remember when I first woke up, I seen Arnie Duncan, the owner of Craig. Like I seen Arnie Duncan. He literally came in person to let me know like everything gonna be okay. We got you. We got your parents. We got your brothers. And from then on, it's like I knew like I want to have this relationship with them because my big brother, when he was locked up, I told him about the program. I already had it set up for him before he even got out. So when he got out, he got his high school diploma. He working with his son. I did the same thing for my little brother. He got shot 10 times in 2022 in November. So it's like the streets is like a repeating cycle. It used to be structure back in the day. There's no more structure because it's, as they call it, big homies. But it's like, it's social media, it's the peer pressure because what you see one person doing, everybody look at it as cool. So when they see it, oh, I want to be like him, I want to be like him. And then there's no father figure. So me personally, I grew up in a single parent household. So I didn't have a father figure to tell me, oh yeah, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. I seen what my cousins, what my homies, I seen what everybody else was doing. And I'm like, my mama, she need the money, I need some money. So I just did what I thought was good at the time. But once you start getting older and you start seeing like all the deaths and all the shootings and everything, like I done been through too many funerals from cousins to homies, and it's like, it's just a repeating cycle. And it's a good thing what David brought up. He said, like, how do you prevent people from getting guns? And that's a good question, but it's who are they getting them from? Because some people, it could be your family, it could be your uncles, it could be anything. You see social media, you see the music videos, you see what everybody else doing. So now they looking at that as, oh, that's cool right there. Oh, Lil Durk doing it. Oh, they doing it. So why we can't do it? But the difference is it's different now than how it was before. Now you could just die just for looking at somebody wrong. Like somebody that want to get into it, you just for, oh yeah, you said something about their shoes or you gave them a compliment. It's just a lot that's being triggered. It's what you call it, the amygdala. It's like a switch. When you turn it on and you turn it off. But it's something called CBI. It's different step process. It go from your thoughts to your feelings, your body actions, your sensations. So it's like everything starts with you, but it depends on how you, how can I say it? It depends on how you want to do it because you can't stop the violence, but you can try to reduce it as far as, when I say reduce it, as to think before you act. Because anything can happen to anybody. And the first thing, oh, I'm going to get a gun. And you go shoot, but you're not thinking about the consequences. Oh, it's cameras right here. Oh, it's witnesses right here. So you do anything, it's always consequences behind it. So the thing is, you don't have to, I'm not saying like, okay, like you said, conceal carry. Okay, that's good. But my thing is, that's for self-defense. It's a lot of people that's out here in the streets that have concealed carries, and they look at it as, oh, yes, somebody come through, we gonna shoot. No, it's for self-defense. You can still get locked up for having, even though you have concealed carry, you can still get locked up because it's something called overkill. When you shoot somebody and they fall and you keep shooting, even though you got concealed carry, that's overkill. You shoot somebody in their back while they running, that's called overkill. So it's like, it's still pros and cons to having the CCL and everything. But coming from my viewpoint and me being young and having kids and being through the process, it's like when you get older, that's when you finally realize like I should have did something different. But right in the moment when it's going on, all the years going on, you're not thinking about it because you young. You seeing all the money, you seeing all the outside activities, you seeing everything that's going on. But it's like it get to a point like when you start having kids or when you start thinking about your goals and your future and thinking about everybody that you lost, that will really make you start thinking like it was, excuse me, it was cool at one point in time, but now it's time to be a grown man. And that's what I had to do because I got 4 kids and 2 of them still months old. So it's like I went from being outside, waking up every day, not knowing what I was going to be or what I want to do in years to come to now I got a plan. I got a mental plan. I got a plan at the crib, the vision board. I got everything because I know what I want to do now. I know I want to invest in property. I know I want to flip property. I know I want to do entrepreneurship. I know I want to go back to school for criminal justice. But I wasn't thinking like that probably like 2-3 years ago. But being in CRED, I'm not gonna lie, it's a very, 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 very good program. I was in the firehouse too. Pastor Field, that's my boy. That's my boy right there. I was in there, and it's like at that time when I went to the firehouse, I was still straddling the fence. I didn't know. I was still on. Oh, okay, I'm gonna be outside getting my money, but I'm still try to make it here, and ain't gonna let the outside activities outweigh the future at that time. So it's like when I got to CRED, I knew what I want to do because I messed up at the firehouse. So I'm like, I'm gonna have to do something. But a lot of people that I told about it, a lot of my friends and all that, they still they be thanking me right now to this day because a lot of people have a lot of stuff going on that they don't like to talk about because nowadays in this day and age, if you talk about your feelings, oh, you soft or oh, we can't kick it with you and all this and that, it's okay to be different. It's okay to stand out because that's what I like to do. I like to be different. I like to stand out. So if I feel any type of way, I'm gonna let you know. If it's something that you're doing that's not right, and I know I did it before, I'm not gonna let you go down the same path. I'm gonna try to tell you, but only thing I could do is tell you. I can't make you do something that you don't want to do. But Chicago CRED is a very good program. Like Paul, he definitely. When I need a job, I need anything, call. If you can't do it on the phone, we gonna come up here. We gonna figure something out. So if we don't take anything from today, gun violence prevention is very, very, very important because it's a lot of kids that's young, 12, 13, 11, that's looking at my generation, looking at our generation, their generation. It don't matter because it started from the older generation. The older generation trying to change it now, but it's so much going on that the young generation, they not listening. So it's like, I feel like it's better when you come from a person that's been there, the person that's their age, the person that knows what's going on because them the ones like the outreach workers. You go out, you go get them and bring them in and you understand what the problem is. So I say Chicago CRED, that is something that everybody should want to get into. The firehouse, that is something everybody should want to get into because it's going to keep you preoccupied and not even thinking about, oh, a shooting here. Of course, you're gonna hear about it because you still got some friends and stuff like that. But that's gonna make you think like, okay, if I go grab this gun after this just happened, what's gonna happen to me? So I say CRED and the firehouse, that's definitely something that I feel like should be in a justice system. Like when young people have court, oh yeah, we'll go to jail. No, don't send them to jail. Send them to CRED. Send them to the firehouse because them are people that understand. They understand the stuff that we're going through. So I say that's it. Very, very something important to invest in.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is C.W. Harris. 22 years old. I got 2 kids, one biologically, and I got a stepdaughter that I've been in her life since she was about 8 months. Her father actually passed away to gun violence when she was about a month old, and I've been there since she was 8 months, and she about to be 6. My son about to be 2 this year. I started Chicago CRED like 2023. I had just made 21, and I was dealing with a lot of trauma because my son was actually on the way the whole year of 2023. He was due in September. I started in September 26th, like September 26th, September 27th. That was his birthday. I actually came right to crib the day him being born. My auntie actually passed away the day before my son was born, so I was really dealing with a lot of trauma. But I know that I wanted to do something different and I wanted to change. So like that whole year, I was planning. I had to think because I had just got out of jail. I had to think what decisions I was gonna make because I know I wanted to be something better. And my son, when I found out that I had a son on the way, like when my child's mother was 1 month pregnant, she was telling me like she was ready to get rid of him because she thought that I was gonna have a strange feeling about like really doing it, like going through with it. And I was procrastinating, but I know what situation I was in. I had just got out. I was on parole, so I was thinking like I need to do something different. So it's like this might be my last piece to my puzzle that's gonna make me really motivate me to do something to change because I was tired of going back and forth to jail, sitting on house arrest, anything that, and I was going through a lot of trauma. I lost all my friends. I got into the streets about the age of 14, and I lost 2 friends that year on the same day. The next year, I lost another friend and another friend. It was 2 every year, 2. And then the year 2020, I lost my best friend that I've been with. I grew up with this man since we was about 7 years old. And I've been with him since then. And then he passed away. And then 2 years out of that, I lost another friend. And it's just like it was a repeating cycle. So I know I ain't want to keep going through that. But even though I know it's going to keep happening because I got friends that's going to keep doing the same thing that they want to do. But I know I wanted a different route for myself when I found out I was going to become a father. So I have mutual friends that was in CRED. They told me to join because they said they had good resources and all that. And I'm knowing like I want to change, but at the same time, it's hard to try to come ask for help because you don't know who really trying to help you for real. Because I grew up under older men that was really misguiding me. They telling me all the wrong things, telling me to do this, telling me to do that, telling me to do this. And then, so you really scared to really trust somebody. So I come into this space with a little bit of open mind, but I'm still closed up. I'm still like a shook up pop. So it's like I'm balling up everything that I got in, but I'm just coming in to see what they really about. And it's like, we got this thing that's like called base teams. So we go through phases of the program. So it's like, we start off in outreach, then we go to phase 1, phase 2, and then you go to ENT. That's the ending of the program. It's an 18-month program. So when I moved up to phase 1, they did my base team, and it's like you sit at the table with all of the staff, and they question you to see like what you learning and stuff. They see what you learning in the program. And my life coach, we had life coaches, so we had 3 life coaches. We one of my life coaches, he described everything about me. He was talking about me, and it brought tears to his eyes, and that touched me deep because it's like this a grown man. He only known me for about 2 to 3 months, and he's shedding tears talking about how I'm improving in my life and all that, and he's seeing a lot of him in me. So it's like, man, this a grown man really shedding a tear about somebody that he barely know, and these real dudes, like all of them did 10 plus years. He did 17, the other one did 23, the other one did 20. So it's like, man, this dude really care about me. And then get down the line, they took us out of town to Washington, D.C. I actually, on our way back, I got arrested for something that ain't had nothing to do with me. So they wanted my site manager, they was thinking he was gonna leave me. But he like, nah, I can't leave that little brother out there like that. And then it's like, he stayed another day for me to go to court. And it's like, after that, he started calling me his son because it's like we just clicked after that. Like, I had a bond with it. It's just like, man, this dude really care about me. Like, these people really care about me. And I see that how far they reach for me. And it's just like, man, it touched my heart because I ain't never had that. Like, I had a father figure in my life. I got my father, but it's like, it's a difference when you got people really that's doing the same, been through the same thing that you've been through. My father, he ain't come from this type of time. And he wasn't doing street activities and all that. So I didn't get that from him. So it's like, when I got these older guys really intervening in my life and they actually trying to help me break this cycle, it's like, it's different. Cause like they support you to the fullest. I ain't never seen no grown men that can support some young African-American males in their own community. Like, and these people, like, they don't have to do this. So it just play a big role. And then now I'm in a phase of they starting a program through me with the youth now. Cause it's like our program starting from 18 to like 35 years old, like 35 plus and all that. So now they put me in a position because they see how all my traumas that I done overcame. And now I'm trying to change. They put me in a position to start with the youth about 15, 16, and 17 high schoolers. So they want me to be their life coach and teach them because I'm young, I'm closer to their age and I've been through a lot to be able to break their cycle. So we trying to change the narrative of what's going on in the communities. And then we got Paul. I'm gonna shout out Paul because he the reason that I'm even up here doing this. He giving me this opportunity. Yeah, it's like every time Paul see me, what's up, man? Give me a handshake, man. I was just talking about you. I'm like, come on. And it's like that touched me deep because I know that he really see a lot into me too. And it's like all of them, that's what everybody, Arnie, all of them, they happy to see me and they telling me they just got done talking about me or they finna get me into this. They want me to come through this for them. They want me to come through that for them. And it's like, that's deep. Cause I tell everybody that's around me, like everybody, all my friends, they see that I'm changing. Like they can't say that I'm relapsing on none of that. So like in the groups, we got these 3 pillars. The first one is self-differentiate. The second one is self-regulate. And the third one is safety. So like with self-differentiate, it's probably my most favorite because it's basically like, say for instance, you got a group of friends that you know you didn't grow up with your whole life. You didn't grow up with these guys your whole life. You've been doing whatever you've been doing with them your whole life. And then you come to a point in your life where like, you grown now. So I'm not on the same type of time and y'all don't. I can distance myself, but I can still love y'all. I can still care for y'all. I can still be y'all friend. But I'm on some other type of time. And then the regulation part, the self-regulation part is like, you running into obstacles that you know you probably can overcome before, but you know you got a future ahead of you now. So you know how to think twice before you do something, like he said, the CBI. So basically using your mind. You thinking what you got, you thinking past what's going on right there, like in that moment. Like if somebody was to step on your shoe, you ain't gonna crash out about it. Cause it's like you got more to go. You got more stuff in front of you better than that. So you don't want to look back on that. And safety is just like, just keeping yourself, if you know you can't go over there, don't even go over there. If you want to go to a party or none of that, don't even go. If you know you got to bring a gun or any of that stuff, you just keeping yourself out the mix. So yeah, Chicago career really did a lot for me. And I don't know, I just finished the program actually two weeks ago. I just finished the whole program 2 weeks ago. And now I'm career staff, so now Chris.
Thank you so much for that speech. I really appreciate hearing it from Chicago Cred. That was excellent. My name is Emma Federico. I'm an MD, MPH student here at Loyola and Loyola Stands Fellow. I am honored to welcome our next presenters joining us from the Firehouse Community Arts Center, a Chicago nonprofit focused on preventing and interrupting youth and young adults caught in violence. Please welcome Pastor Phil Jackson and Jamal Baker.
It's okay, it's Bakar, it's all good. So I hope I have half the charisma that these 2 young gentlemen had before me. But I'm gonna read from what I've written, but speak from the heart. My name is Jamal Bakar, and I'm known in the CVI community as a credible messenger. I currently mentor 5 young emerging adults from the ages of 19 to 26. I am with them 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. And like Paul alluded to, the work that we really do is not on the clock. It's the crisis management calls that you get at 11 o'clock at night, or the calls you get about somebody needing an Uber ride because they're in a dangerous neighborhood they don't feel safe in. And a lot of that work is unapplauded. It's not spoken about. It's not quantifiable. The work that we do through the Firehouse in our curriculum, it consists of cognitive behavioral intervention, like these 2 young brothers mentioned, job readiness, and pro-social identity formation. We have not caught lightning in a bottle, and there's no foolproof approach. We are not changing people's lives. We are attempting to change the way they see their lives so that they can change them. When people ask, What's the biggest problem with the youth? I answer them the same way every time. They feel like they are not long for this world. There's a mantra used by mentors from the Stick Talk program in Chicago, which trains youth on gun safety. It says, "Dare we love the shooters." This mantra speaks to two realities. One reality is that far too often we write off and label those that are driven to violence as irredeemable and that they do not have a place in society. Ironically, these are ideas that they have already internalized before their violent acts. The other reality this mantra seems to suggest is that the lack of love is how we arrived at the problem to begin with. The love that I'm talking about is the kind of love that gives a person a sense of belonging and purpose and identity. I said earlier that I was a credible messenger. Well, that credibility comes from my own experiences growing up in one of the most violent neighborhoods in our city. I was 5 when I witnessed my first murder, 11 when I saw the second, 13 when I was shot for the first time, 15 when I was arrested for weapons charges, 17 when I was shot for the second time, and 18 when I was charged with a violent crime. And I spent 22 years, 11 months, and 11 days in prison. The world I grew up in is not much different than the world my mentees are growing up in. The year before my 10th birthday, 1993, 57 children under the age of 16 were killed by gun violence. It was the same exact number in 2023, 40 years later. While kids in other parts of the city were pretending to be Spider-Man, Batman, and Superman, my friends and I were imitating the roughest characters our little minds could conjure. We played funeral games, taking turns throwing pulled up weeds and dirt on the kids who lost in our shootout games. When I ask my mentees what they feel is the biggest thing that holds them back from having a successful life, their answers are eerily like the way I would have answered when I was their age. And they all say death. Just like my friends and I, they have a premature acceptance of the death around them. Their identities are shaped by maladaptive behaviors, and they do not plan for their futures because they cannot see them. Their sense of belonging is connected to the hopelessness of the circumstances and to the brokenness of their relationships. The young people I work with need to know that they belong, because the consequences of having young people in our world feeling like they don't is that death is for young people and that they will die young.
Thank you, Jamal. Mother Teresa said a quote that said, "Whenever there's an absence of peace, it is because we forgot that we belong to each other." That's dope, isn't it? Okay, I need some response back. That's dope, right? Y'all sitting there for the longest. I know, wake up. Whenever there's an absence of peace, it is because we forgot that we belong to one another. And here I am sitting in the firehouse with another great leader, and little Lou was sitting there, got kicked out of his crib, and we had to talk to his mom about him coming back to the crib because he's gonna die. If he's not at your crib in a place to live on the streets, he's gonna die. So we sit there and they talking. Mama's going in on him about, look, you came in the crib and you was counting money on the bed. You're supposed to be in this firehouse program and you up here making, counting money on the bed. I know what you on, that's what your father was doing. He stopped her. He said, "Mama, you never said you love me. You never said you care for me. On the block, they know me. They care for me. They take care of me. You don't know nothing." He just went in and walked away. Loved his mama, but he wasn't going. We pulled her off to the side and we said, "Yo, what's going on?" She said, "I never tell my sons I love them." See, I had to raise 3 boys by myself. I had to raise them hard. These streets is hard. I had to raise them hard. I said, look, today, you're going to have to tell him you love him today. He's going to die. It was a situation after he got kicked out the crib, 2 situations happened to little Lou, and we knew it wasn't going to be a 3rd situation where he's going to come out of it. And in that day, when they came back together, that day, she said, "I love you." And then that day, he knew he belonged to something more than what the streets told him he was. We believe at the Firehouse Community Arts Center, one of the things that David said is like the underlying issue and things that CRED works on, the underlying issues of who you are. That when a young person knows that they count, they know they belong. Look at your own group. When the group that you with, your tribe, when y'all anime cats or y'all playing pool or sports or video, when you know you count, right now, you're like, when this thing is over, I'm finna come over, because you know you count with that tribe. Imagine then a whole life where you counted to do dirt, you counted to do nothing and nonsense. You got rah-rah noise for that, and you was the man. Identity was wrapped in the streets, right? And you were performing in that space. Our work is to create, from helping young cats move from one pact that says this is what you count for and you belong to us, to another pact where they can live on purpose, walk in authority on the strength of their character. Spit that, Jaquan. What does it mean to live in that pact? Say it loud. Oh, okay, get the mic. All right, there we go. There you go.
So that's one of our mantras. I'm Jaquan. I'm actually a victim of gun violence, but see there. Staff alumni, definitely. I'm always gonna be for about 5 more years. But our mantra, we respect ourselves and our surroundings. Okay, I'm sorry. We are a family that respect ourselves and our surroundings. I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous. Yeah. So we are a family that respect ourselves and our surroundings. We love each other. We support each other. We help each other to live on purpose, walk in authority, and live by the strength of our character. We will no longer be victims of circumstance we create. We are the change we've been waiting for. Pack.
Good job. Our work at the Firehouse Community Arts Center is to create another pack. You went from one pack to another pack. With this pack, you live on purpose, walk in authority on the strength of your character. It is a 10-month process. What I mean is we have 4 months where our outreach advocates push aggressively in 4 hot areas in North Lawndale that have been traditionally known as high crime, high violence areas. And in those areas, we are hyper local. We know your mama, your grandmama, your cousin. Didn't your son, didn't your nephew go to this school? We know you, man. You can't juke us in that space. And that's very, very important, because we in this for real. Whether you're in our program or not, we're going to be in your life and irritating you with righteousness until you recognize the power that's within you. You just saw 3 freaking powerful people up here that are just dominating in their life. That is power. That's generational curses being broken and changed. So I'm saying that to you. It takes a fire hydrant hole. We have a firehouse. We converted a Chicago fire station, 10,000 square foot building in 2007. It'll be 20 years in 2026 that we've been in that space, into this space where our mission is to interrupt the cycle of violence among the lives of youth and young adults in North Lawndale through the power of arts and faith. And in that space, our outreach team hits the block in an aggressive way for 4 months. 2 months of light touches with the cats that we've already been working with, and then 2 more months of heavy touches. And those heavy touches, that's when we ask real questions. Do you really believe another world is possible than the world you're in right now? I don't know what you mean by that. What you mean? And so in those conversations lead into phase 2, which is then daily mentoring for the next 6 months. You're with us 20 to 25 hours a week. And on average, it's between 45, 50 young men and or women for those 6-month periods of time. And so from March, April, May, June, phase 1 is happening. July, another group of young men or women will enroll, and they'll go all the way through to December. In that process, we have 2 months of what we call head and heart. We do CBI. We try to get in your grill. You learn the mantra. You have a PAC life mission statement. What is your life really about? Every staff is to grow and to have a PAC life mission statement. Mine is, I create a world where those labeled disadvantaged come alive through faith, hope, and love. And that's based upon Howard Thurman's great quote, which says, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, because what makes you come alive is what the world needs, right? And so in that same space, we believe these young cats, like you just saw, they are alive. They are alive and on purpose, and seeing how their words and their impact and their presence is transforming lives. And we believe that about every young king or queen who walks through our doors. They just don't know it yet. They just don't know it yet. And we say a fire hydrant of hope because we believe it's that amount of pressure for a long period of time in front of somebody. They finally get up and be like, yo, I'm wet. Okay, let's get to the next one, right? But Jaquan and I have known each other, I don't know, 15 years. And it was a lot of situations growing up in this process. He's now stepped into that purpose for the last 4 or 5 years. Went to Ghana with us to a rites of passage a trip we do every other year with our young guys on the block. We'll be going in October this year. But in this process, 2 months of head and heart of the 6 month, 2 months of head and heart, 2 months of hands where you actually in workforce development. We have a kitchen. So part of that is working in the kitchen, learning if you even want to be in the kitchen, but at least you never had a job, you learn what it means to work, right? And what it means to clean up, what it means to take orders. And then you get into auto mechanics or you get in another field. And then 2 months of launch or feet, basically in that space where you're beginning to get enrolled in a trade or you're beginning to step into a spot where you're going to be employed. But this process right here is just our initial movement. Then we have alumni status where cats stay with us with the alumni status for the next year or so to make sure that there's no triggers that could cause them to stumble back into that space, right? We own a home where in the fall, preferably we'll have 8 beds in there where we can house some of the young men who aren't and don't have a place to stay. And they can actually live there so that their days can match their nights, right? So that they can actually see that this is possible, that another world is possible and how much of a change agent they are in that space. It is relentless, empowering engagement. You have to be relentlessly engaged, empowered engagement in the lives of the young men. Because just like what you were just saying, and some of our young guys say the same thing, right? That there's some older cats who tell you to get this lick, make this money, and that begins to be appealing to you if you have no other voices, if you have no other fire hydrant in that space, right? And then gradually you recognize that that's leading me down this road. So that level of engagement. 2, you have to commit to a long walk in the same direction. Right? We've had so many situations with cats coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back. The young man, Little Lou, as he was in our program, a year later, he changed and started walking. And he was so cold with his commitment. He started walking through the block like there was no issue with him. And he began to own his space, began to work at a spot, began to be a manager. Then another year later, he died and was killed by gun violence in the midst of that turning point in his life. But you allow nothing to be in vain in the midst of that, right? So that work that was there for that time in the midst of that. My other last part is that we need more people. We believe that each of our young men need 5 mentors in their life, right? Each one has a different voice, different sound that make a fist so that they then can push through the obstacles that they come at. And those 5 people can be an array of different ways. 1 hour a month, every day, every other day, FaceTime, but that voice continues to put a full court trap on with the voices they have in their head that tell them that they're not good enough because of what has happened and trying to be defined by their past and their context. We'll wrap this up. I know we're taking our time. You know, we're from the West Side. We just take over stuff. It's what we do. It's what we do. I know it's going to be a panel discussion, but there was a farmer who was, on this little horse going through a little field, and he saw a car that was in the ditch. Looked like the car was in there for hours, and the man was in a nice little suit thing, and he finally had somebody come by and said, "Hey, sir, can you, I don't know if you can do this, can you hitch your horse up to my car and get it out this ditch?" He said, "Yeah, I'll do that." A few minutes later, the man hooked it up to the back of the car, and he had a little whip thing. He said, dancer, Johnny, Becky, Linda, and he started naming all these animals. He said, "Giddy up!" And that horse just pulled that car out the ditch. The man was amazed. He said, "Yo, this whole one horse pulled my car out the ditch." He said, "But I got a question for you, Mr. Farmer person. Why'd you name all them names? Because it was just one horse." He said, "My horse is blind." He said, "But if my blind horse would have known it was the only one pulling this car out the ditch, it might not have pulled it out the ditch." We got to be committed to doing this together. It can't just be Craig. It can't just be the firehouse. We got to have more people in various ways to be able to pull this situation out of the ditch so that we can say, yo, it's only 24 people who got a shot last year. 5 people got none in that space so that we can continue to be that bold and not feel as if it's just one of us doing or one focus of it to happen. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our local advocates today. It's meant a lot to hear from you guys. We've unfortunately ran out of time for questions, but both Firehouse and Chicago Cred will be out tabling at resourcing, so you can go and ask your questions to them personally out there. Next, we're going to be hearing from Rashara Smith from the Firehouse's Arts in Residence. She created the art piece at the end of our program, and as well as the program Nightmare, which she is going to recite for us right now.
Hey, thank you. Pastor Phil is kind of hard to follow up because I have anxiety, and anxiety is scared of him. But this poem is a depiction of PTSD from living in a violent neighborhood. Nightmare. The anger overtook the body, and the sinful took the soul. Those unhealed wounds drive the thoughts of the unsaved mind. The hands take the weapon of steel and break the bridge to drain the blood of the innocent left behind and forgotten. The forgotten faces took by the reasons of the lost spirit, that lost spirit who lives in the shadows of the mind. It only grows weary and sinks into the vision of the devil's eyes and the words of the devil's lies. And those lies turn truth only in the darkness of the nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rashara. She's quite an artist. This was her poem. She has so many poems. And the yellow turning point art piece that you see in your program is Rashara's. It's also big out in the lobby. So thank you. And thank you to Chicago Cred and Firehouse for everything that you've given us here tonight. All right, for the last phase of our program, we have our Loyola Stand Student Fellows. For the second year, Loyola Stands Against Gun Violence has had graduate student and undergraduate student fellows. You a few of them, Emma Federico, Olivia Osola, Mariah Hewley. We also have Monier Joyner and Marilyn Moore in the AV booth there, running everything here. And they've been working with us for 6 months, putting all of this together too. So thank you to all our fellows. 3 of our fellows, Emma, Olivia, and Emma and Mariah, sorry about that, will now give short presentations, educate you with their own kind of knowledge and wisdom. And then we'll have the dinner and the resource fair. Emma, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I already introduced myself earlier, but my name is Emma Federico. I'm a student here at Loyola and also a fellow with Loyola Stands. One community that's important to me is the LGBTQ+ community. Through being a part of and working closely with this community, I've witnessed the impact that gun violence has on us. Today, I want to share insights into these challenges and, more importantly, talk about how we can drive meaningful change. On June 12th, 2016, during Latin Night at Pulse, an LGBTQ+ nightclub in Orlando, Florida, 49 people were killed and 53 others were wounded in a tragic attack. At the time, it was the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. November 19th, 2022, in Colorado Springs, Colorado, a tragic attack at an LGBTQ+ nightclub left 5 people dead and 17 injured. These mass shootings are stark reminders of the extreme violence the LGBTQ+ community and spaces have faced. However, these incidences are part of a broader reality. LGBTQ+ individuals are 2.7 times more likely to be a victim of a violent crime compared to non-LGBTQ+ individuals. In the United States, 1 in 5 hate crimes are motivated by sexual orientation or gender identity bias. 1 in 3 transgender youth have been threatened or injured with a weapon on school property. Alarmingly, there is also increased suicidality among LGBTQ+ individuals, with one report finding 39% of LGBTQ+ young people seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. Firearms are the most lethal means of suicide, with 90% of attempts with a firearm resulting in death. LGBTQ plus young people with a firearm in their home reported higher rates of seriously considering and attempting suicide in the past year compared to those without a firearm in their home. It can be overwhelming to hear all these statistics, but I want each of you to know that you can make a difference. Here are 3 things that everyone in the audience can do to promote change. The first thing you can do is call your representatives. I know many people, myself included, don't like to pick up the phone. The 5 Calls app and website is one resource that can make this easier. It allows you to easily contact your representatives and let them know your stance on a number of important topics. First, you put in your address, and then it pulls up your representatives. They have a list of topics you can choose from, and they even give you ideas for what to say in the phone call. The image on the right is an example of Representative Jan Schakowsky, who represents Chicago, specifically those who live on our Lakeshore campus. The next thing you can do is support organizations working to reduce LGBTQ plus suicide. The Trevor Project is a nonprofit focused on suicide prevention and mental health services for LGBTQ plus youth. They provide 24/7 crisis intervention and suicide prevention services. Ways you can support the Trevor Project are through donation, volunteering to become a crisis counselor, and reading and sharing their research findings. The last thing you can do is support LGBTQ plus affirming healthcare. One organization within Chicago is Howard Brown Health. They are a nonprofit that provides affordable and affirming healthcare to LGBTQ plus individuals. They also provide a number of resources to young people experiencing homelessness. I have been volunteering with this organization for a little over a year and have really enjoyed it. The picture on the left is of me at volunteer orientation last year. Some ways you can support Howard Brown is by volunteering, donating, and shopping at Brown Elephant. They have 3 thrift shop locations around the Chicago area, and all proceeds support LGBTQ plus healthcare and fund care for the uninsured and underinsured. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mariah Hewley, and I'm going to be giving a presentation on the intersection of Black women and gun violence. Ajike Owens, a 35-year-old mother of 4, was fatally shot on June 2nd, 2023 in Florida by her 58-year-old neighbor, Susan. The shooting followed disputes involving Owens' children playing near Susan's home. After Susan reportedly threw a skate at her children, Owens knocked on the door and Susan fired the shot and killing her instantly. Ariana Delane, the 4-year-old niece of George Floyd, was shot while sleeping during a New Year's Eve attack on her family's home in Houston in 2022. She survived serious injuries after surgery. Her family criticized police for a delayed response, and the case drew national attention. The case drew national attention due to her connection to George Floyd and raised concerns about gun violence and police accountability. Lauren Smith Fields, a 23-year-old woman from Bridgeport, Connecticut, was found dead in her apartment on December 2nd, 2021, after a date with a Caucasian male that she met online. Despite suspicious circumstances, her family was notified of her death. Instead, they found out about her passing from a note that was left on her door by her landlord. Her death was ruled an accidental overdose, but it sparked national outrage over how Black women's cases oftentimes are not heavily investigated. Tamala Horsford, a 40-year-old mother of 5, died under suspicious circumstances November 4th, 2018, while attending a slumber party in Forsyth County, Georgia. She was the only Black woman present. Her death was ruled an accident, but inconsistencies in the handling of the investigation sparked national outrage. Though the case was reopened in 2020, following public pressure, It was later closed again without any charges filed. The cases of Ajike Owens, Lawrence Smithfield, Tamla Horsford, and Ariana Delane serve as painful reminders of how Black women and girls' disappearances and deaths are oftentimes overlooked, dismissed, or mishandled by authorities and the media. Despite clear cause for concern, the cases were met with delayed investigations, lack of urgency, and systemic neglect. Although all of these cases are not directly linked to gun violence, this pattern reflects a broader issue where Black women and girls do not receive the same level of attention, protection, or justice, reinforcing the urgent need for change in these cases and how they are handled and prioritized. This pattern of neglect doesn't just stop with cases of violence or disappearance, it extends into every aspect of Black women's lives. From healthcare to the criminal justice system, the disregard for their well-being is pervasive. In the medical field, for instance, Black women face disparities that often lead to preventable deaths, like shockingly high maternal mortality rates among Black mothers. The systemic failure is a direct result of deeply ingrained racial and gender biases, and it underscores the urgent need to address the broader framework of neglect that Black women experience. When we look at the broader impact of this neglect, we must ask, how do the harmful narratives and stereotypes surrounding Black women contribute to the systemic disregard for their well-being? It's not just about resources or flawed systems. It's about the deeply ingrained biases that shape how Black women are perceived and treated. Let's take a look at a few of these harmful stereotypes and explore how these influence how Black women's cases are handled. The strong Black woman trope. This stereotype suggests that Black women are inherently strong, resilient, and less vulnerable to harm or trauma. Media and even healthcare providers often underestimate the severity of violence against Black women or dismiss their victimization altogether, assuming that they can handle it or that they're somehow responsible. The angry Black woman stereotype. When Black women report violence or try to advocate for themselves, they're less likely to be relieved or treated with empathy. Their reactions to trauma can misread as hostility rather than distress. Hypersexualization and criminalization. Black women and girls are often viewed through a hypersexualized or criminal lens, especially in the media. When Black women are victims of sexual assault or domestic violence, they're most likely to be blamed or seen as complicit in their own abuse. In homicide cases, they may be portrayed as troubled rather than deserving of dignity and justice. These narratives don't just shape public opinion, they shape outcomes. According to Brady United, young Black women aged 18 to 24 are 8 times more likely to die by firearms than young white females, also aged 18 to 24. Additionally, Black female youth under the age of 18 are nearly 7.5 times more likely to die by firearm homicide than their white peers. Over the past 5 years, firearm homicide mortality rates have grown more significantly amongst Black youth. Across all age groups, firearm homicide rates among Black females have increased significantly between 2017 and 2021. The overall percentage increase for Black females is 102.88%, with it's drastically higher than the 9.26 increase for non-Hispanic white females. The 0 to 17 age group saw the most drastic rise in firearm rates among Black females at 134.13%. The 18 to 24 age group among non-Hispanic white women females actually saw a 31.58% decline, whereas Black females in this category had a 100.69% increase. Insane. So, what can we do? Well, gun violence is a complex issue that goes beyond just access to firearms. It's deeply connected to a systemic inequities, economic instability, and lack of community resources. That's why real change requires more than just policy reform. It takes community-driven efforts. The nonprofits I've linked are doing critical work in Chicago, providing support to those affected by gun violence, advocating for policy change, and creating opportunities for prevention and healing. By exploring these organizations, we can see firsthand how local efforts can make a difference and why investing in these solutions are so important. I have one last thing that I'll leave you with. At the crossroads of gun violence in the lives of Black women lies an untold story, one where too many voices are silenced before they can speak, and too many lives are cut short before they can even be truly lived. The intersection of Black women and gun violence is not just a statistic. It's a call for justice. It's a reminder that the Black lives of women are not expendable, that our pain is not invisible, and that our fight for dignity, respect, and protection is far from over. In this fight, we must ensure that our stories are heard, our lives are valued, and our justice is finally served. Here is a link to our link tree where we have all of the websites, all of the resources from all of our presentations that we've given today. And thank you.
Hi again, everyone. My name is Olivia Osola. I introduced myself briefly earlier today, but I will be giving a speech on gun violence and domestic violence against women. When I was applying for this fellowship position, I realized that my previous philanthropic work that I've been doing at Loyola directly correlated with Loyola Stand's mission. In my 4 years, I've gotten to hear from not only victims of domestic violence, but also affected by gun violence in their intimate partner relationships. When I was introduced to this initiative, I knew that it was a step in creating change in women in my community. After meeting the other fellows, I realized that all of us were brought together powerfully through the purpose of being advocates. Even though we all differ in our background and passions regarding gun violence, the goal to enact change and promote real action against an epidemic was more powerful than having everything in common. Today, I wanted to bring your attention to what domestic violence is and how domestic violence goes hand in hand with the topic. Domestic violence is violent or aggressive behavior within the home, typically involving the violent abuse of a spouse or partner. Today, I will focus on the disproportionate effects of domestic violence and gun violence. To share some stats right here in Illinois, 66% of women are killed by an intimate partner and they were killed by a gun. Along with this, the risk of a woman being killed by an intimate partner increases 5 times when their abuser has access to a gun. These stats leave out the other facet of gun violence, meaning the use of a gun towards a partner that doesn't include shooting it. This can look like using a gun as a threat to instill fear in the woman, preventing them from escaping their situation. As of 2023, Illinois passed the Protect Illinois Community Act. It included laws that prohibited assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, facilitated better implementation, and efficacy of Illinois' firearm restraining order law. But there's more to be done. Here in Chicago, an organization that I've worked with is called WINGS. It's the largest service provider in Illinois that provides safe housing, but also mentoring and counseling for those leaving domestic abuse relationships. By supporting organizations like WINGS through volunteering and donating money, it makes the next step after leaving an abusive relationship less difficult. Additionally, you can communicate with your legislators by calling them and emailing them, telling them the issue you want represented. Finally, demonstration. Demonstrate and protest for the change that you want to see. The gun violence epidemic is treatable. It's in our reach and in our power. From what we've heard today, the power we have lies within action. Action to call a legislator, action to volunteer, action to demonstrate, action to educate ourselves and spread our knowledge like we are here today. The most powerful thing you can do is the work. Whether this is your first step in understanding gun violence prevention, you're looking to find more resources, or engage in a community with like-minded individuals. By attending this summit today and committing your time to educating yourself, you're becoming a part of something bigger than you. Thank you so much for joining us and standing against gun violence.
Thank you all for making the time to be here today. My name is Kiana Williams-Broderick, and I'm one of the co-chairs of Loyola Stands. We sincerely appreciate your presence at the 6th Annual Loyola Stands Against Gun Violence Community Advocacy and Violence Prevention Summit. A special thank you to our exceptional presenters for delivering impactful messages to educate and empower us to be agents for change in gun violence prevention efforts. I want to extend a gratitude to Jordan Harrison and Rashara Smith for the incredible, talented artists behind the artwork featured in the summit materials. The Loyola Stands Committee was established in 2016 after collaboration between the emergency department and the chaplains at Loyola Medical Center to support individuals and families affected by gun violence in the Maywood community. This year, we had the privilege of collaborating with exceptionally talented students and community organizations. As we move forward with future summits, we eagerly anticipate a new year filled with even more collaboration and impactful programming. Moving forward, we hope to continue for our collaborations with not only you today as conversations and action items, but also future initiatives aimed at reducing and preventing violence in our own communities. Today's programs include actionable steps that each of us can take in the fight against gun violence. It's crucial to recognize the detrimental impact that gun violence has on our cohesive fabric of our community. Each gunshot victim impacts our community's unity, underscores the importance of our collective efforts to foster safer environments. Whether you're a faculty member, staff, student, or community member, we urge you to leverage your voice, time, and vote to address gun violence and break the cycle for future generations. A few more things before we end. We'll be reaching out to all of our attendees via email about a post-summit evaluation. Please take a moment to complete this evaluation using our QR code on the screen. For our Zoom participants, thank you so much for being in active engagement. Lastly, I encourage you to stay for some good food and participate in our resource fair directly after this. We will have remarkable organizations showcasing their work in the community, and we would love for you to explore. On behalf of the Loyola Stands Committee, we thank you all once again for your commitment towards gun violence prevention, and have a wonderful evening, safe travels, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.